Are you looking for a place to meet like-minded people? Perhaps
Yes,
you're
we
a
are.
light worker looking for a safe place to share your thoughts and services. We've got a place for you, intuitalks.com. Join for free, post updates, blogs, create and join groups via website or radio or class package. The possibilities are endless. Join the all-spiritual, all-under-one-roof network, www.intuitalks.com.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Jenny, for that wonderful introduction. Voices from the Past today. We are looking at the Egyptian Book of the Dead. I'm Dorothy Holder, and you're with Energy Therapies. Now, the reason I say that is I've had a few messages over the week saying, you never say how to get in touch with you. So, all right. So it's www.energytherapies.intuitalks.com for my shows. If you want extensive information about my programs, then just go to energytherapies.co, not .com, not .co.nz, just .co. So that takes care of that. But you can come to Intuit Talks to check out archive shows on demand. You can, oopsie, I've got to stop doing that.
Are you looking for a place to meet like-minded people? Perhaps you're a light worker looking for a safe place to share your thoughts and services.
You watch me fix it.
We've got a place for you, intuitalks.com. Join for free, post updates, blogs.
I'll listen to it again, right?
Website or radio or class package. The possibilities are
endless. And that's a good spot to finish the second time round. Sorry about that, chiefs and chiefettes. What happens is if you click close on the player, it just plays it again. And it's like, and I really mean to exit it, but that's your lot. So here we go. Welcome, Gigi. Welcome, everybody, to today's show. Now, the Egyptian Book of the Dead is of particular interest to me. I think it is amazing. Now, the pictures that you're going to look at here are actually from the Book of the Dead, and I need you to understand at the start that there are a lot of them. There's not just one, and they're not necessarily the same. So we'll talk about that, but this is an original piece. It's an original, this is what it looks like, and away we go. Because it's a collection of spells, essentially. It's one of those things that really has engendered a lot of interest from occultists because of the word spells, I suppose. Because, like the Tibetan Book of the Dead, they've taken on that name, which is more recent. It never used to be called that, the Book of the Dead. But, of course, it is what it is. And it's not occult and it's not dark and gloomy, but it is exciting and interesting. And a lot, and I do mean a lot of modern spiritual belief comes from this book or books like it, or the beliefs as they've been handed down and resurfaced. So I find that really the fascinating aspect of doing both the Keepers of the Light now as well as this type of series is looking at and finding those correlations between ancient, not just beliefs. They lived this. It wasn't for them a convenience. It wasn't for them a pseudo-psychological drama. It wasn't for them salvation. This is what you did with life to achieve the best that you could achieve. And that's where it really comes down to the nutshell here. It was to get the very best out of the afterlife, and that's what the Book of the Dead is really about. It was to enable the soul, or the soul of the deceased, to navigate the afterlife, and that's about where the similarity of the Book of the Dead, the Tibetan book and the Egyptian book finishes, but it can't be ignored that they both had one thousands of years ago. They were very focused on the afterlife. You can actually go back. I've got a link in here, and you can have a look at the Keepers of the Light, the Tibetan Book of the Dead. It's what actually gave me the idea for this series, because I realized it probably should have been somewhere else, but that's all we have, because it wasn't its own religion. It wasn't its own organization or secret group. It was a document, really. This title was given to the work by Western scholars, actually, the Book of the Dead. The actual title would translate as Spells for Going Forth by Day. There you go. So that's actually the name of the Egyptian Book of the Dead, Spells Going Forth by Day. Although the work is often referred to as an ancient Egyptian Bible, it's not really anything of the sort. But like the Bible, there was a whole lot of different texts that were brought together a lot later, much later, well after they were written. It was never a publication, so it was never, like the Tibetan Book of the Dead was formalized. That means it was standardized. That meant they were all the same. This one wasn't. It was very personalized. A person had a spell that go forth by day book made specifically for them. So there would be similarities, but there would also be differences, and that's noticeable throughout them. So when we look at all of the spells and the complete compilation, most people would not have had all of it. They would have had some of it. But the ever-practical Egyptians weren't going to ignore, the common things in common day life. So it was one of those fantastic things. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. I've personally never heard of anybody refer to it as the Egyptian Bible, but I have seen articles which listed as such. And it's like, go read it. Go have a look at it. It's available online. You can go get the PDF. You can go to the museums. There is so much material around this. There's not really a lot of excuses for misrepresenting it. It was never codified at all. So with that, expect to see differences in different versions. And some of the well-known versions are actually listed, and I've got a picture or two to show you there. They're actually named for whence they came, or for who they were written, I should say, to be more accurate. They were created specifically, in particular, to start with for nobility, and royal families, and then they became, as time went by, more popularized, more attainable. I suppose you can only make so much money off the royalty, and as time goes by, they were looking for a way. I'm sure the scribes, the people that wrote this, that, how long would it take them to put out one sheet of something like that? So pretty amazing. The copies of the Book of the Dead that first came to the attention of the Western world was really due to scholars in the 19th century, so quite late when it was sort of put out there in the Western world. Grave robbers actually found rolls of papyrus with mummies and called them the Book of Dead Men. Okay, and these titles did not refer to the contents of the scrolls because the robbers couldn't actually read them, but they instead referred to the fact that the books belonged to dead men. So if you want to call it the Book of the Dead, we are talking about that. These books belong to the person who died, not to the living, and was buried with that person. So you understand that. There was a man, his name was Carl Richard Leppius, and he was the first man to translate a complete manuscript of the Book of the Dead in modern times in 1846. Do you read it from top to bottom of each row and not left to right? I think it's right to left, but I couldn't tell you for sure, to be honest, with Egyptian hieroglyphics, because I know they work in groupings, but I could be wrong. So I'm not an Egyptologist. I'm really just a curious fan. So since I've never tried to read one and don't know how, there is an amazing documentary within the last 10 years, I'm pretty sure it was. I've actually written this down to be probably my final show, is how to read hieroglyphics, and they've discovered this whole new technique for reading them that has blown the community out of the water because it alters the meaning of most traditionally referenced texts. That means the texts that have been transcribed already and that are in the encyclopedias and that are in schools are not necessarily right. In fact, quite often actually wrong. And this young man developed a new system, a computerized system, of course, and entered all this information in. And this is where computers have really come into their own, I think, for this type of work. It takes away a person's belief and ability. It pulls the understanding of everybody, but also it creates patterns and finds patterns that a man on his own or even a group of men couldn't see or couldn't find over 40,000 manuscripts, say. So it's quite enlightening. So I was thinking of making that the last show for the Voices of the Past, and how it's still not all completely out there for us, that it's still being developed. So 1846 was when this was translated, and Carl established a numbering system used to distinguish the chapters or spells that we look at it for today. So each chapter is a spell, and each spell has a specific purpose, which is pretty cool. Now, he also is responsible for encouraging other scholars to collect other variations of the book and the spells in the book, and to just gather it all together. And that's how we ended up with this one big book with an ultimate 186 to 200 spells. They're not quite sure because this was done a long time ago, and there's actually pages missing from that. So, but it's a significant collection with clear variations. You can see the different spells and how they might be. And there's also a commentary by Lepius himself. You can go find that and you can read it. It's in PDF form online, absolutely free of charge. They are onerous, as in, they are a bit long-winded, and they are originally written to be spoken by a dead person who's got all the time in the world. When we move to slide 3 here, you get to have a look at this slide, and this picture in particular is a detail from the Book of the Dead of Anaru from Thebes. So this is a particular man's Book of the Dead, if you like, his personal book. Third intermediate period, that's the 21st dynasty, which was written, this piece of paper here, that papyrus you're looking at, 1070 to 946 BCE, and is held in the Egyptian Museum of Turin. And to me, every time I look at something that's that old and that has such a clear representation, this is for one man, for his life, the effort and the work, and this is just one page. You can see where it gets folded in the middle. It gets folded, but they're rolled like scrolls. They're folded, however it might go. So the afterlife was considered to be a continuation of life, really, and not just a continuation of life, by the way, a continuation of life on Earth. So in the Egyptian mind, you transitioned. You weren't so much looking for rebirth. You were living your life again, or you were living the next stage of your life, but you weren't here doing it. And I find that a fascinating concept, because nothing quite adheres to that now. We've got this ongoing existence of the soul criteria for heaven, if you like. And that's where you go and you sit amongst the angels, hang out with God, whatever. There's no real idea of what you may or may not do, but you continue to exist. Then we've got the reincarnation idea, where you spend a bit of time in some kind of in-between space, then you pop back to Earth and have another go at it, And then, of course, you've got this idea, which is really quite structured, and it is that you walk on into a whole new life, essentially. But it's the life is the afterlife. It's not considered a rebirth. Fantastic. Ramona says, I wonder if the skin color is telling of the status of the individual. It's possible, but you realize that in the North African and Egyptian places, that there were people of multiple nationalities, and the same for India too, all on that same continent. The mixing and mingle, and we'll get into that too, because there are a number of languages. And you see this in all of these shows that I'm talking about, the Keepers of the Light, and I'm talking about the Voices from the Past. All of these shows, you'll hear me speaking about these ancient scripts that are written in Latin, they're written in Greek, Latin being the most recent, they're written in Sanskrit, Sumerian texts, and you'll have one whole book written in a number of different languages. So there was a lot of integration, but also they were more multilingual than we are today, I believe. We tend to only adopt the languages we have to adopt, whereas the people that were doing this kind of work seem to have a multiple array of learning of different languages at their disposal, but they also did it. But I think too, we had that idea back then, not so much an idea, we had a reality where a scribe was a scribe. That's what he did for a living. He didn't do anything else. He just wrote things down, and he just wrote things down for a reason. He wasn't writing a book. He wasn't doing it as we would today for entertainment. He was writing it down for a particular purpose. It was to be used by somebody, or it was to record something for posterity. So quite a fascinating thing. So this particular thing is at the moment you're looking at, it's over 3,000 years old, what we're looking at right there. And we've got these wonderful stories, giving money to the ferryman. This is where it comes from, by the way. It doesn't come from anything Celtic or more recent. It comes from way back in early Egyptian times. There was a belief there that you crossed the Lily Lake. So I'll read it in order, otherwise we'll get a little bit confused. But after one's passed through various difficulties in judgment, which you do, we all have that going, The judgments are in here as well, please note. And again, this may even predate the Enochian writings, which predate the Bible, which is interesting. Having said all of that, we're talking not the Western Bible we know. We should always remember that we're talking about the Torah. We're talking about the Tanakh. We're talking about the Jewish Bibles. We are talking about those Bibles where Western Bible came a very long time later with its alterations, etc. So here we go. So you pass judgment into the hall of truth, and then a paradise is which a perfect reflection of one's life on earth. So essentially what we're talking about here is once you go through these challenges, once you work your way through them, which has a similarity to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, you find yourself in the same life as you're living now. So look around you, everybody. The same life that you're living now, only it's perfect. It's lost all of the negatives, all of the things. And find it interesting because they're talking about then when you go into this afterlife, you've got a chance to get rid of all of that stuff and make your life exactly as you would want it to be. There's no real description of what you get to do or why you would do that. Having said that, it's no different to living your life now. Does there have to be a why? And in the afterlife, there is no, presumably, end date. You know, we don't have that 70 to 150 years to work it out. And I say 150 because you go back far enough, blah, blah. There are, centurions out there. After the soul has put itself into this paradise, that being the paradise, which reflects the idea, more modern idea of a heaven, doesn't it? It does reflect the idea that there's this paradise that we go to, which is different, very different in its belief to the Buddhists and the reincarnation theorists, which is you get through that so that you can come back, pretty much, or you go and join the gods, and then there's no real talk about what that quite could mean. But you're not meant to want to join the gods in the reincarnation theories. You're meant to not want that at all. That's egotism. The gods are the gods. You'll never be one of those. It's very fascinating little differences that we have there. But once you cross over the Lily Lake, I love it even. Lily Lake. Who wouldn't want to cross a Lily Lake? I want to cross a Lily Lake. To rest in the field of reeds, and of course there's a ferryman that you have to pay homage to get there. In order to reach the paradise, you need to know first where to go, how to address certain gods, what to say at certain times, and how to comport oneself in the land of the dead. Of course, I'd swear it'd be all over for me, which is why one would find an afterlife manual extremely useful. And wouldn't you? We all talk about we don't have a book of life or a manual for life. We don't have a manual for women and men. We don't have a manual for raising kids. But here the Egyptians have thought of everything. They've got a manual for the afterlife. So that way you know exactly what you're doing. And you can get yourself where you need to go. The Book of the Dead that originated from concepts depicted in tomb paintings and inscriptions from as early as the 3rd dynasty. So we go all the way back to 2,670 years before the current era. So that's before the death of Christ, by the way, before the current era. So if you're talking about that, then add the 2,000 years since. We're talking nearly 5,000 years ago, right? A really goodly time that this idea was able to be seen, not necessarily when it originated. So we need to understand that we can only find it because it's was written on tombstones and tomb paintings. So that's part of this whole series, which we'll talk about. The purpose, there's a lady historian, Egyptologist, Margaret Bunsen, explains, was to instruct the deceased on how to overcome the dangers of the afterlife by enabling them to assume the form of several mythical creatures and to give them the passwords necessary for admittance to certain stages of the underworld. They also served, however, to provide the soul with foreknowledge of what could be expected at every stage. So having a Book of the Dead in one's tomb would be the equivalent of a student in modern day having the answers to all the tests. So that means they didn't have to go through any trials and tribulations after death. It was done for them because those that had, for whatever, the knowledge, the priests, those that had explored these spaces and places could give them the clues. They could give them the idea of what it is that they needed to do, which I think is pretty cool, right? A cheat sheet for afterlife. At some point prior to 1600, before the current era, BCE, the different spells had been divided in chapters, and by the time the New Kingdom, which is 1570 to 1069, the book was extremely popular. At that point now, anybody could have one. It wasn't just for the rich anymore. The whole thing became kind of put out there, I guess, because people decided I don't know whether it was maybe more people were learning how to read, more people understood how it worked, or maybe they didn't care if they couldn't read it as long as it was what they needed. We're starting to now look at writing down or buying, if you like, the first absolutions, I guess, the first idea that, whatever you've done wrong, as long as you say this when you get there, after you've died, you'll be fine. And that very much is replicated in Catholicism today, to this day. They took it on a lot later, of course. It was extremely popular. Scribes who were experts in spells, so now we're getting to the spell side of it, would be consulted to fashion custom-made books for individuals and for a family. The spells, as Bunsen notes, these spells and passwords were not part of a ritual, but they were fashioned for the deceased to be recited in the afterlife, and this also separates it out from the Tibetan Book of the Dead. If someone was sick and feared they might die, they would go to a scribe and have them write up a book of spells for the afterlife. The scribe would need to know what kind of a life you've lived, in order to surmise the type of journey that you would be expected to make after death. And then the appropriate spells would be written specifically for that individual. And I think that's really powerful stuff now. We're talking about a person not quite confessing their sins, but close to it, right? We have got the foundations here of confession. The basis is there. You're not being given absolution, which I've always really strenuously disliked. Excuse me. What you're being given, though, is a tool for yourself to use to atone or to heal it or to sort it when you get to that particular God over the other side who might want to just take you out, who might think, no. This slide is a detail from the Book of the Dead, Tayanasakt. That's probably really badly said, but hello. Again from Thebes from the Ptolemaic period, 332 to 30 BCE, so that's about 300 and somewhat years before the death of Christ, the current era. It's also in the Egyptian Museum. Prior to the New Kingdom, the Book of the Dead was really only available to royalty and the elite. And the popularity that starts to expand this was the Osiris myth, or what they call a myth. I mean, let's face it, suspend it. In the period of the New Kingdom, made people believe in spells, that spells were indispensable because Osiris featured really prominently in the soul's judgment in the afterlife. So now we have judgment. This is the origin of judgment, if you like, as well, because we've got Osiris who sits in judgment of you after you have died, and the Egyptians believed totally in that as well. Osiris was the person to please. And as more and more people desired their own Book of the Dead, scribes did oblige them, and the book became eventually, I suppose, another commodity produced for sale. Having said that, they're still individualized. So in the same way that publishers maybe today present on demand, I wouldn't say today, actually. If you go back, I would say a vanity publisher. So you paid the money, you got your book, and what you did with it after that was entirely up to you. So it's very much that way. They could have as few or as many books in the spell as they wanted, but I've got a feeling that it would have been down to, if you hadn't been a really good person, having a book like this would be more important to you. If you've been a horrible person, you would have every spell at your disposal to get through every possible challenge to your afterlife. So kind of fascinating. We've got, again, Bunsen, the historian, writes, the individual could decide the number of chapters to be included, the types of illustrations. They were illustrated, as you can see, in these books that I'm showing you here. Illustrations, the quality of the papyrus used. The individual was limited really only by what they could afford, what they could pay for. The pyramid texts were pretty much the original. Does any author have the spells written in? Yes, it's written in English. You can go to put in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, or you can put in what I said initially was the spells to go forth by day, and you can then. I'd put in the Egyptian Book of the Dead though, and when you have a look, put in PDF, and you'll see a list of translations that come up. Forget the articles because they're kind of blah, but go straight to the translation and you'll be able to see the full list of all of the spells. The spells are listed on the Cairo Museum. They're all over the place. There's so many. They've been so well looked at, I guess. It's in English just about everywhere. So we move on to where we are, the pyramid text. Now the pyramid texts are interesting because they are when it first comes to light, I suppose, that there's this multiple layer of different ways that you can have this presented for you. So the pyramid texts are actually in the pyramids of some of the old kingdom pharaohs. So we're going way back. The oldest copy is in the tomb of the 6th dynasty pharaoh Unas. These texts contained essential information for the pharaoh's survival and care in the afterlife. And the pyramid texts identified the king with Osiris and Ra and described them as honored by Osiris. So he's saying we're buddies. So there's this kind of salesmanship going with this for the dead, on behalf of the dead. These texts stated that his connection to Osiris would allow for the fulfillment of his needs in the afterlife, and during the period only the pharaoh could have had texts carved into his tomb that would ensure him a good place in the afterlife. So nobody else has really got that clout, But I could imagine too, this is the pharaoh, so if you're the scribe, you're gonna write the best possible stuff you can for him, aren't you? The coffin texts are something that we are fairly familiar with, I guess. They were first compiled during the Middle Kingdom. This is another period. This is what they look like, and they find them on the actual coffins. And they were written from the 18th to the 21st dynasties. Some of these texts were papyrus rolls that could be 50 to 100 feet long, right? So if they're 50 to 100 feet long, you've been a bad, bad, bad person. Is the name of our daughter's cat. Nice. Sits in judgment too. I bet that cat just looks at you with judgment in her eyes, his eyes. The text being that like the priests would carve or paint portions of these texts on coffins and furniture. So you'd have the papyrus, and then you would have parts of it on the coffin or the furniture that's in the tomb, as well as on the actual coffin. Each spell of the coffin text received its own title, but there was no set arrangement established by the priests. Priests placed amulets carved with portions of the coffin, and we discussed on Witches' Breeches that amulets are purposely for protection, while talisman can be protection or to attract something. So the amulets were there, and text in certain places on the body to ensure the soul's well-being. It's very, very interesting stuff. So we've got that whole idea that you're writing on the body, that you've got the furniture, and you've got other things going on. I can put a link in later, but if you put the Egyptian Book of the Dead in the search and put PDF after it, you'll find all the translations. They're everywhere. Really, they are, in English everywhere, because there's not really a foreign language with them because they're hieroglyphics. So it's going to be hieroglyphics or it's going to be English, pretty much, unless you go to a French site. Then you've got the Sate compilation, which is a little bit different again. And this was first developed in the 26th dynasty, and it continued in use until the end of the Ptolemaic period, and this is when everybody started to get it done. Wider portions of the population used these texts and included portions of the pyramid and coffin text, so they would go around and gather the things that they liked, I guess. And they standardized the order and number of spells in the Book of the Dead. So this comes later, of course, from the original. Priests designed spells to protect the dead or to guide them through the tuat, which pass the different obstacles on the journey. Most of the extant copies of the Book of the Dead are unique in their choice of spells and order, and that's all that's going to happen for you when you go find them and you go and look at them. then you will also see that they're not all the same, not because somebody's mistranslated it, but because they are actually different. And there are a number of original versions that are available in the world today in various museums. So kind of cool, bearing in mind that they were for the individual. Even how they were set out, everything was done for an individual. But in general, when you get to the more popularized version, chapters 1 to 16 will be the dead person goes into his or her tomb. They include the burial in all of these. The soul passes into Tua, the soul returns so the body could move and speak again. Now, this is important, so the body can move and speak again. Chapter 17 to 63, basically, in general, explains the myths of the origins of the gods, describes places in the Tuat like a map, and helps the dead soul live and be reborn. This is reborn into the afterlife, by the way. Chapters 64 to 129, the dead soul travels the sky in the sunboat as one of the blessed dead. Soul journeys to the Tuat for the audience with Osiris at sunset. Then chapters 130, 89, and chapters being spells, these are spells, each one is a spell, tells how the dead person becomes one of the gods after her vindication before the gods. And that's a difference between Tibetan and the Tibetan. You've got no business wanting to be with or be part of the gods. In the Egyptian Book of the Dead, you're aiming to conjoin with them in some way, become part of that. It details the protective amulets and the food the dead needs, please note. Describes places in the Tuat the dead will travel through. There are other important texts. The Book of the Two-Way, which describes the underworld as composed of canals, streams, islands, fires, and boiling water. Do you recognize any of that? Hell and brimstone stuff. The Book of Gates, describing the night journey of Osiris and the rewards and punishments for inhabitants of the underworld. And, of course, the Book of That Which Is, describing 12 sections of the underworld, and each related to an hour of the night. And, of course, the Book of Adolphus, detailing the battle between the sun god Ra and the giant serpent Apophis. So it's an amazing, interesting thing. And this is an example. This is spell 134. So when we're looking at 186 to 200 spells and you're thinking, oh, my God, it's going to be a tome. Not really. Each spell, and I noticed this too, like with the Enochian tablets, each chapter, there were 100 chapters. And each chapter, some of them were only a paragraph. So bearing in mind that these people who are handwriting these, they're hand creating them. So it's a fantastic thing. And thank you so much, Christy, for grabbing that for everybody. Here's spell 134. To be spoken over a falcon, standing with the white crown on his head, Atum, Shu, Tefnut, Geb, and Nut, Osiris and Isis, Seth and Nephthys, being drawn into ochre on a new bowl placed in the sacred bark, together with an image of his spirit, Ba, whom you wish to make worthy. It being anointed with oil, offer to them incense on the fire and roasted ducks and worship Ra. It means that he for whom this is done will voyage and be with Ra every day in every place he desires to travel. And it means that the enemies of Ra will be driven off in every deed, a matter 1,000,000 times true. Spell 134 out of the Book of the Dead. Now, what you need to understand is that's not read to the dead person. It's not read to the person as they're dying. This is instructions. So this is for the dead person to be spoken over a falcon. This is what he's got to do. Go find a falcon standing with a white crown on his head. You find him first, okay? And that's what you got to do. The following quote or spell gave the deceased the ability to breathe. So once you're dead, you must breathe again. So you go into this death, and then to move through the afterlife, you must breathe. So, O you sycamore of the sky, may there be given to me the air which is in it, for I am he who sought out that throne in the midst of Wenu, Hermopolis that is. I have guarded this egg of the great cackler. If it grows, I grow. If it lives, I live. If it breathes air, I breathe air. Pretty interesting concept. And of course, these are given to you in this scroll, given to you in this book form. They're buried with you so you can use them. It's so you can say them, so that you can go hunt these down, do these missions. So almost like a game, like the modern games, internet games, digital games, where you've got to complete the task, you get the thing, and then you pop up to the next level. One of the most well-known and well-understood, probably, even if you don't know, this is what it looks like, guys, by the way, up close and personal. Well-known and one of the more well-understood, without necessarily realizing you know it, is the weighing of the heart. These are pyramid texts, pyramid spells. So there's a lot of information that they've been able to interpret over many, many years. You can come back and look at that. Now, this is a particular spell. In itself, the whole complete spell looks just like that. That's one spell. So you can imagine how long it would be if you had, say, 50 of these or 30 of these on this one big long papyrus. Could easily get to that 50 to 100 feet, right? It's a very complex thing to do. So for one person to have this with the illustrations at the top, with all of the hieroglyphics, you are talking an intense piece of work. That would have been worth considerable money. Here's another piece with the imagery of a Book of the Dead, and then the hieroglyphs that go with it. Really fascinating stuff. These are originals. These are from the Museum of Cairo. And I'm trying to find what I've lost here. I've lost something. Did I go too far? Yeah, no, I didn't. I've missed it. I'm really disappointed myself because I had that image there, and that ain't it. So the weighing of the heart, which I don't have, I'm just going to go find it. Weighing of the heart, I'm not sure what I did there. I must have got sidetracked. The weighing of the heart was something we have seen so many times with hieroglyphics that, it's impossible not to recognize it. And this is what I mean. It's one of those things. Hang on, I've got to save it, download it, put it over here. Yay. One of those things that we have got so much going for us because we've seen it again and again and again, and then not realized that this is what it was. And I'm guilty of that for many years. When I saw this for the first time, I said, I've seen that reproduced so many times that it's just impossible to believe that one wouldn't know. Now, the point of that I'm trying to make is that it has an influence. There's some kind of trigger. There's some kind of understanding of it, even if we don't realize that we understand it. Here's the imagery here that has been reproduced. You'll see these scales so repeated, and now, of course, by understanding this, you understand why. The weighing of the heart is one of those most amazing things. When a person died, no, it's not justice, not at all. That's what we assume, but it's called literally the weighing of the heart. When a person died, they were guided by Anubis, there's the dog right there, to the Hall of Truth, also known as the Hall of Two Truths, where they would make the negative confession. Now, this is interesting to me because it's also known as the Declaration of Innocence. So this was a list, and I love this. This is a list of 42 sins the person could honestly say they had never indulged in. So out of all of the potential sins, and a sin being just doing something wrong, you need to find 42 that you didn't do, which I think is phenomenal. So this is Osiris in the chair, and of course you can see the falcon right there. There's a list of 42 sins the person could honestly say that they had never indulged in. Once the negative confession was made, Osiris, Thoth, Anubis, and the 42 judges would confer, and if the confession was accepted, the heart of the deceased was then weighed in the balance against a white feather of Ma'at, the feather of truth. If the heart was found to be lighter than the feather, the soul passed on towards paradise. If the heart was heavier than the feather, it was thrown onto the floor where it was devoured by the monster goddess Amut, and the soul would cease to exist. So it's pretty harsh judgment. So that's it, So don't confess to any sins. Don't deny any sins that you have indulged in, and try and find 42 that you haven't. Now, presumably these are all written in your book of in your book of death. Spell 125 begins with an introduction to the reader, the soul. What should be said when arriving at this hall of justice? Purging. Then the person's name. Purging, we'll say Ramona. Actually, Brian's concerned. Purging Brian of all the evil which he has done, and beholding the faces of the gods. The spell then begins very clearly to telling the soul exactly what to say when meeting Osiris. So this is when you're dead, you've got this written down, and you must say to Osiris, "Hail to you, great Lord, Lord of justice. I have come to you, my Lord, that you may bring me so that I may see your beauty, for I know you, and I know your name. And I know the names of the 42 gods of those who are with you in this hall of justice." Now, you can't ignore how similar this sounds, right, to more modern belief systems. Just can't ignore it. Who live and those in the hall who live on those who live on those who cherish evil, and who gulp down their blood on that day of the reckoning of characters in the presence of Wenifer, another name for Osiris. Behold, the double son of the songstresses. Lord of truth is your name. Behold, I have come to you. I have brought you truth. I have repelled falsehood for you. I have not done falsehood against men. I have not impoverished my associates. I have done no wrong in the place of truth. I have not learnt that which is not, and so on for 42. After this prologue, the soul then speaks the negative confession and is questioned by the gods and the 42 judges. So not only do you have to say you didn't do these 42 things, but then you get questioned by the gods and 42 judges, feeling pretty small, I should imagine. At this point, certain very specific information was required in order to be justified by the gods. I will read it to you all, yes. I'll be having my show, I'll be 140, and I'll be reading it for you all. Now, see, the living don't read this for you. You're going to have to print that puppy out and have it buried with you. Read it for yourself so you know what to do. And in the afterlife, you can read it because you've got it with you. You just whip it on open there because you'll have done the breathing thing. You can breathe in the afterlife. So one needed to know the different gods' names. You had to learn 42 gods' names and what they were responsible for. One also needed to know such details as the names of the doors in the room and the floor one needed to walk across. One even needed to know the names of one's own feet. Are you ready for this, people? Do you know the names of your own feet? Now, there's a question. As the soul answered each deity and object with the correct response, they would hear the reply, "You know us, pass by us," and could continue. At one point, the soul must answer the floor about the soul's feet, okay? And "I will not let you tread on me," says the floor of this hall of justice. "Why not? I am pure. Because I do not know the names of your feet with which you would tread on me. Tell them to me." Secret image of Ha is the name of my right foot. Flower of Hathor is the name of my left foot. You can see how much imagination these guys have got compared to Bob and Jane and left and right, hey? That's Bob and Jane. "You know us, enter us." And the spell concludes, this is a spell, concludes with what soul should be wearing when it meets judgment and how one should recite the spell. So the instructions are all there of what the soul should be wearing. It doesn't matter what you're buried in. Remember that. Now, if you were to think on it, just think for a minute. I think this is a great exercise. If you were to truly come before a god like Osiris, 42 gods you've just got past, the only way to reach paradise is to walk over this floor, and this floor says to you, "Tell me the names of your feet before I let you stand on me." Honestly, have a wee think on that. Whether you type it in or not doesn't really matter too much, but think on it. What would you name your feet? Now, please note that this person in the demonstration has named them for gods, just so as we're clear, but probably not one of the 42 gods that he's had to pass. And you'd never call your feet Osiris because you'd be in big trouble, mister. You'd be in big trouble. So here we go on. Here's more written. This is how it's written. "The correct procedure in this hall of justice, one shall utter this spell pure and clean and clad in white garments and sandals." If you weren't wearing white garments and sandals, you'd be in trouble. You'd be in big trouble. You wouldn't get through. Painted with black eye paint and anointed with myrrh. Now, we've all seen this imagery, right, on the Tutankhamun's, on his tomb. The black paint around the eyes. You see it very regularly put out there. So there's a specific way to dress. So this is the significance of seeing the white and all of that stuff in here. Following this, there shall be offered to him meat and poultry, incense, beer, bread, and herbs. When you have put this written procedure on a clean floor of ochre overlaid with earth upon which no swine or small cattle have trodden. Now, this is in the afterlife. You don't do this before you're dead. Following this, the scribe who wrote the spell congratulates himself, which I think he should. He goes on to say, basically, that he's done something really good. He's done a great job and assures the reader, the person he's written it for, that he, the scribe, will flourish as well as his children for his part in providing the spell. He will do well, he says, when he himself comes to judgment, and he will be ushered in with the kings of Upper Egypt and the kings of Lower Egypt, and how he shall be in the suite of Osiris, a matter of 1,000,000 times true. For providing the spell, the scribe is considered part of the inner workings of the afterlife, and so he was assured a favorable welcome in the underworld and passage on to paradise. There weren't too many got through. So, well, they didn't live the way we do, so maybe they did get through. If you were focused intensely on the afterlife, if you believed it in a way that people don't really believe it now, I think you would pay a lot more attention to it, You'd pay a lot more attention to being a good person. But they give you ways of talking to the gods for the sins you have committed, and are you repentant? So the Day of Judgment essentially is with Osiris, which much later came to mean God, in more modern renditions of a Judgment Day. It was said that Enoch was the father of Judgment Day. He was called the father of judgment, but here we are, thousands of years again earlier, seeing this judgment ideal in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and not as a religion either, by the way. This is how you get through it, And an image would always be accompanied the written account showing a giant balanced scale with a heart on one tray and a feather of Mart on the other. It's a really amazing thing. Amat was the devourer, snatched the heart off the scale, and he was the animal who had the crocodile's head, a big cat's body, and the front legs. I don't know if you've seen that or not seen that, but it's on the left here in this image, and you can go and find that. It's a very common image. The Egyptians considered the heart the most important organ in the body. They believed it was the center of emotion, memory, and thought, which is a powerful thing to believe about the heart. The Egyptians believed that Amat's consumption of a heart would cause a dead person to stop existing. That is in the afterlife. The image of the Book of the Dead showing the heart balancing against the feather of Mart guaranteed a favorable outcome. So that's why the imagery was put in there. They're showing it as balanced, and they're describing to the dead person that this is how you need it to be. Otherwise you cease to exist, which is a powerful thing. The text is so often obscure that it incorporates comments or glossies explaining the meaning of the words or offering alternatives. So the scribe would write it in, and then just in case you don't get it, there'd be sort of like a parenthesis with an explanation of what that might mean. For example, it writes, the purpose of the spell was to ensure the owner could demonstrate his knowledge of religious secrets if challenged in the afterlife. So you'd have this basic precept, and then you would have an explanation of it, so that if a god challenged you and said, do you know what this means? Do you understand the context of this? Then you could say, yes, you do, by proving that you do, which is actually reflected in confirmation, initiation ceremonies and rites all over the world, all religions. Very fascinating. The purpose of... this spell, number 335, is in the coffin text. And part of the spell is found in the papyrus of Ani reads, all the evil which was on me has been removed. And then under it, it goes, what does this mean? It means that I was cleansed on the day of my birth in the two great and noble marshes, which are the Heracleopolis, on the day when the common folk make offerings to the great God who is therein. What are they? Eternity is the name of one, sea is the name of the other. They are the Lake Natron and the Lake Mart. So you can't just say, all of the evil is gone. You have to be able to explain why and how that happened. It's a lot. It's a lot to get through. Again, you're not learning this when you're alive, but I don't doubt you're reading all of this when you're alive so that you're well versed in it when you die. And as people start as they start chanting Bible texts and belief and hear that as they're dying in a more modern world, I don't doubt that the Book of the Dead played a big role as a person was dying, that although it wasn't read to them, they may read through it. Because it's personal, other people didn't need to see it. So it's sort of like a diary too of your wrongdoings, I guess. For the average person or even the king, the whole experience was much less certain. If one answered all of these questions correctly and had a heart lighter than the feather of truth, and if one managed to be kind to the surly divine ferryman who would row the souls across the lily lake, one could find oneself in paradise. The Egyptian field of reeds, sometimes called the field of offerings, was exactly what one had left behind in life, and once there the soul was reunited. Please note, this is too familiar to ignore as well. Reunited with lost loved ones and even beloved pets. And the belief in that in modern spirituality, forgetting religion, is so strong that it permeates religious notes, actually, where people are supposed to wander off to heaven and not care about anything but God and righteousness anymore. They're supposed to be living in bliss. There are still many people who believe that they're reunited with their family. In modern spirituality, it's a common, if not aggressive, belief that you will be reunited with the animals are waiting for you. They're over there waiting for you. And so that we have this whole family that we recreate on the other side exactly as it was here. The same everything, and I mean everything. The soul would live in an image of home that they had always known, with the exact same yard, the exact same trees, same birds, singing at evening or morning, and this would be enjoyed for eternity in the presence of the gods. You need to really think about where you're living, guys. Back in the day, in Egyptian times, people would live in the same home all their lives, and it would have been very comforting, I suppose. There were quite a number of slips and mistakes you could make, however, between arriving at the Hall of Truth and the boat ride to paradise. Please note the boat ride's after, going through the 42 gods in judgment. The Egyptians are practical because the Book of the Dead includes spells for any kind of circumstance, but it does not seem that one is guaranteed to survive these twists and turns. So you have to be honest with the scribe. You have to say to that scribe, hey, look, this is what I did. This is where I was at, man, because this is where I was at, because this is what I did. You might need to understand that I need to be resolving a few things that I did, how that's right. I'd be right here. This would be paradise right here. There's all of these potentials and possibilities. So not every detail described was included in the vision of every era of Egyptian history. So it did change a little bit. But modifications were minor in some periods, while in others the afterlife is seen as a perilous journey. So as time's gone by, it's seen as a more perilous journey, and then it comes back to maybe not so perilous anymore, getting to paradise. And then there became the belief that paradise was only a temporary state, not even the final state, although it was originally the complete state. So even this evolves over time, as belief probably should. At some points in the culture, the way to paradise was very straightforward after the soul was justified by Osiris, while in others, crocodiles might thwart the soul, or bends in the road prove dangerous, or demons appear to trick or even attack, making it impossible for you to get there. So still a powerful thing. In these cases, the soul needed these spells to survive and reach paradise, and spells included in the book titles such as for repelling a crocodile which comes to take you away, or for driving off a snake, for not being eaten by a snake in the realm of the dead, for not dying again in the realm of the dead, because if you die in the realm of the dead, you're dead, right? for being transformed into a divine falcon, for being transformed into a lotus. I mean, you can't help but think of all of these modern games where you get transformed into the very next thing. And again, if we move into the Buddhism or reincarnation style of Buddhism, you reincarnate as animals and lesser beings, the man being the pinnacle or human being the pinnacle. When you aren't so good, when you don't do so well, you reincarnate as a lesser being, and it's seen that an animal is a lesser being. Excuse me. For being transformed into a lotus, which is, of course, revered, for being transformed into a phoenix, and so forth and so forth. There's spells for all of these. They are spells. So here we also have the basis for incantation rituals, which, of course, are the standby and the basis of all Wicca, pretty much, and most magic, if not all magic. So we've got these magical components of transformation, transmutation, and alchemy, really. The spells for transformation have become known through popular allusions to the books and television and film productions, which has resulted in the misguided understanding that the Book of the Dead is some kind of magical, sort of Harry Potter-ish kind of a thing that was used for mystical rites, but it really wasn't. It was an afterlife, not a during life thing. I think that was practicality. I think that the Egyptians were very, very smart individuals. It was never used for magical transformations, that kind of thing. If it was done in the afterlife. They only worked in the afterlife. So it wasn't a sorcerer's text or a magical book per se. It's when I said earlier that it was nothing like the Tibetan Book of the Dead. The main difference, really, and of course the Bardo Thodol is the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which its name actually means great liberation through hearing. The main difference is that a person chants the Book of the Dead, the Tibetan book, to the other person up into on their death and for 21 days after they've died, never giving up on that soul. They are constantly talking to this person, reading these chapters out to them, and the dead person is thought to hear this. Whereas the Egyptian Book of the Dead, you take it with you, and you're on your own after that. Nobody's there to help you out. So it's a powerful, powerful rendition and idea of where things go. You can check out the Keepers of the Light. It's still there on in Chewy Talks if you want to go and have a look at that. It's on page 2, I think, of the on-demand episode. So you go to www.energytherapies.com, .chewytalks.com, go to my shows, and then you'll scroll down and you'll see all of the on-demand episodes, and they're listed in a few pages now. But I do take them out, but I've left the series of Keepers of the Light, the mediums, the hoaxes, and the heroes. So I've left those series in here for now, but they will eventually go, I suppose. So go check that out. Next week, we are looking at a secret library. The Mogao Caves, otherwise known as the Caves of 1,000 Buddhas, revealed some Eastern religions such as Buddhism and Hinduism. The writings and the texts, we know of them as sutras. The best known of these in the West is the Kama Sutra, but it is not the only one, and it is far from the oldest one. We're going to have a look at some of these mysteries that were walled up for 1,000 years before their discovery, and then we're going to have a really good look at that. I think that is a fascinating area. It's just an amazing, amazing idea. Do check in on a psychic affair on Wednesday. I'm doing hand readings. If I don't get photos soon, I will be just diverting that, and I'll do whatever I jolly well feel like. But I am doing hand readings. You can post pictures to me on Chewy Talks. Remember to put @Dorothy, the same as Facebook, and that way I will be alerted. You can post them in the free psychic readings group because I get alerted for all posts every day or at the end of every day for there. Or you can pop them on the Chewy Talks Facebook page. And if you are interested, pop along there where all the shows have a tendency to be posted so that you know what's coming up, etc. But in the meantime, thank you everybody for coming along. Thank you for listening. And remember this week, don't be a part of your own problem. Ciao for now.